Hey guys, how's it going? I've got an interesting video for you guys today. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm happy that you're here. So yeah, thanks for stopping by. Today, as you probably found out from the title, I am doing a video on my top 5 pond fishing techniques. So, pond fishing is something that is very popular among the bass fishing population, and for good reason. Those fish thrive in small ponds, and there's a ton of them around, especially in the US. Pretty much every state has a few good ponds here. I'm at my own personal one that is at my house right now, but even in Vermont there's lots of little ponds that you guys can go fish to, or go fishing at. So without further ado, I am going to get to my top 5 techniques, and yeah, let's start out with this right here. So one really good technique is a spinnerbait. You really can't go wrong with a spinnerbait. It's a great search bait. It's really great at finding fish, and when they're in a feeding mood, when there's a little chop on the water, when it's not so sunny out, this is a great bait. Hookups are pretty good, and you can usually keep them pretty well pinned. And another great thing is that most small ponds are pretty weedy, and the spinnerbait is known to be quite weedless. I personally like I like a willow Colorado combination. It doesn't thump quite as hard as a big willow blade or Colorado blade rather on the end, so it's a little more subtle and it puts off a lot of flash. And usually fish here eat a lot of bait fish, small bait fish, if there's any in the pond, and this mimics that very well. I'll generally like to throw that along with a few other things I'm going to show you in a bit here on a kind of a medium-sized bait casting rod. So this is 15-pound monofilament. It's got some stretch. It really allows you to keep the fish pinned on that big single hook. And this is a 7-foot medium heavy fast action bait casting rod. I think that's a pretty good all-around combination of rod with line here. You can use it for a lot of different techniques, and so I think this is probably one of your best bets for a bait caster when you're pond fishing. Next up, when you're fishing in ponds, something you always have to have tied on is some type of unweighted plastic worm. Here I just have a trick worm. This is the finesse worm by Zoom, but you can use whatever you want, even Senkos. I'm putting Senkos in this category. You know, you can do a lot of great things with an unweighted worm. It just sinks very slowly when you're using a Texas rigged hook like this. It's a very natural presentation, especially you can throw it on light line. It's very subtle, and so when the fish are pretty timid, this will get them to bite for sure. You can rig it like this, weedless, with the hook point buried just very slightly in the plastic, or you can also rig them wacky style, which there are better hooks for this, like a little octopus hook or something. But basically you just hook it right in the middle like so. That will catch fish in any pond. What I have this on, what I usually run a finesse worm of some type on, will be a 6'6" medium action, or medium power, sorry, spinning rod, spooled up with pretty lightish braid. Like, this is 20-pound. In my experience, it's a little heavy. It's what I've got, and I've got it on my reel right now. I'd probably put 10 or 15 on if I were to recommend something, and that goes to about a 6-foot leader of 8-pound fluorocarbon. Very thin line, very sensitive, and it's strong enough to get a big fish away from weeds if you really need to. My third technique is probably my favorite, although it's not always the most productive on ponds. It's certainly one of the most exciting, and that is a topwater frog. This one is one of the first topwater frogs I ever owned, actually, and it's still kicking. This is made by Booyah. It's got some good hooks, a very soft body, and you know, sometimes a topwater frog is the absolute best way to catch them. Right now I have this on my designated frogging rod. It's a 7.3 heavy action, or heavy power fast action rod with a Shimano Curado 200i and 50-pound braid. However, when you're in a pond like this, there aren't very many very thick weeds all around here. So I would honestly feel comfortable throwing this on my other bait casting setup that had the 15-pound mono on it. Although if you knew you were going to have to throw a frog to catch some fish, I would suggest bringing a pretty stout rod and some good line. Alright, so my number 4 technique is going to have to be a weedless jig, like this one right here. You just can't go wrong with a jig, especially in ponds when fish are feeding on the bottom a lot. They eat a lot of frogs and crustaceans and small things on the bottom. So this is a very key bait for you to use in certain times of the year in ponds. This one is about 1/4 ounce. It's got a pretty light hook. You can see it's slightly bending there. It's pretty soft, but that little thin hook is a lot of times all you need, because you don't need to pull them away from a lot of cover, generally speaking. You know, it's got a lighter weed guard, and this one is great for most ponds. Like this one right here would be perfect because there aren't a lot of weeds out deep, things that fish can wrap you up in and break you off. I like to run it, this one is completely torn up, but this is what was just on this. I like to run it with a little chunk trailer of some kind with, you know, some little flapping appendages, nothing crazy, but something to just give it a little bit of bulk, help the fish hold on to it. If for some reason you're in a pond where there's some really thick weeds that you need to get your fish out of, there are always much bigger jigs like this one here. This is a 1/2 ounce made by Strike King, and look at that hook. That thing is beefy. This will get fish out of any cover you can find, I promise you. And if you can't get it out, it's probably not the jig and hook. So that's another option if you're fishing around heavier cover. Now if you need to go to something really small because the fish aren't biting very well, they also make micro finesse jigs like this one here made by Z-Man. These things are great. They've got a little tiny hook here and a little metal weed guard that is really very effective, and that one I will throw as well on my light spinning rod that I bring with me. So that's another great option for jigs. Alright, my number 5 technique is going to be, it's going to be some type of topwater hard bait. I've got a few here that'll show you a few different things, a few different actions, and I'll explain why. So first of all, I've got this is a Super Spook Junior. It's about I think it's about a 3.5 inch spook bait. It's a topwater walking bait, and it walks back and forth. It doesn't make a whole lot of disturbance for its size, which is the key factor here. You're not gonna see much bigger bait than this in a pond, as far as like bait fish that the fish will be eating. But this is really, for its size, it's a very subtle bait, very quiet moving, and on days when the water is slick calm, I usually use these around the evenings or morning times when the fish are most active in their feeding mood. When a lake like this or a pond like this is slick calm, during those times when I'd want to use a topwater, I'll go to something like this because it puts out just enough disturbance to call the fish in, but not enough to scare them away, really. If that doesn't work, a lot of times you'll need to downsize. One thing I love fishing on ponds is a small popper like this. I don't know why this one doesn't have a front treble, but you get the point. A little popper like this is one of the most effective topwater baits you can throw in a pond, just because it's small. It can be quiet if you want it to, it can be loud if you want it to. You can decide how much noise this thing has to make, because it doesn't have any really loud rattles in it. It's most of the noise is going to be coming from the lip, so you can decide how much noise you need to make for your situation. And a small bait like this, basically just a tasty little snack for most of these fish, so very effective. Another interesting one I've got, I've never actually caught anything other than small panfish on this. This is a little wake bait. It's made by Rebel. I don't know. These hooks are so small. I don't know if they'd even stand up to a bass, but something like this might be something for you to think about. A small little wake bait like this. It swims just under the surface of the water like a crankbait, but it doesn't dive. and that's just another option for hard-bodied topwaters. Alright, and I know this is a 5 techniques video, but there's one technique that you sometimes really need to employ to catch really finicky fish, and in my opinion that would be the drop shot. When the fish aren't biting on anything else, my last ditch effort is to tie on a drop shot. Something like this, a little size 1 or 1/0 octopus hook or a mosquito hook or whatever small hook you want. You know, this leader is a little short, I'm just using this for demonstration. Usually you'd want it at least about a foot, maybe more, maybe less depending on your conditions, depending on how far you want to keep it off the bottom. Use one of various drop shot weights you've got here and some sort of small worm or baitfish type bait that's got a lot of action in the tail. Usually I'll just nose hook it, just like that. And that's a very subtle, very effective presentation. What's great about it is that you can keep it on the bottom and just shake it like so to attract the fish, whereas all the other baits you have to keep moving in order to get the action on the lures. Now those certainly aren't all the techniques I use on ponds, but those are probably the ones I use the most often, I think are most effective for the multitude of different ponds that you can come across. All of the baits I mentioned and more can fit in one hard plastic box and 1 gallon-sized Ziploc bag. It's really great, small package, can fit in a backpack just like this one here, and you bring 1 or 2, maybe 3 rods if you really think you need it, but most of the time I'll just bring a bait caster and a spinning rod, and you can pretty much take on any pond this country has to offer. There we go. There's one. That's about the dinkiest largemouth in this pond, I bet. But it is a largemouth. And hey, any fish is a good fish when you're out here on the ponds, just trying to have a good time. I'm not complaining. So anyways, thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you found this video informative. I hope you liked it. If you did, leave a like, leave a comment too for me. Hope you guys go out, hit up some good looking ponds this week, and I hope you guys catch them good. I appreciate you watching and I appreciate your subscription. Thank you very much. I'll see you guys in the next video.